All right. Well, welcome everyone to International Co-Publishing Agreements with Jason Pitt, Jamila Nedjadi, Sean Nittner, and in Jay Dragon's absence, I believe there's an adorable cat. So the three of us are going to be talking about the three very different agreements that we've made um, for co-publishing games with Jamila of Sword Queen Games. So to start this off, let's just quickly introduce ourselves and our projects that we're co-developing, co-publishing. For myself, my name is Jason Pitre, Genesis of Legend Publishing, and I'm currently working with Jamie on the co-publishing of Once More Into the Void, which successfully kickstarted earlier on this year, which is Jamie's love letter to Mass Effect 2. So, Sean, Jamie, why don't you introduce our haunt, since that one's live?
Yeah, actually. So I also am lucky enough to be co-publishing with Possum Creek Games, who are best known for Wanderhome and Sleepaway and several other games. So I will say first and foremost that I will do my best to represent the agreement that I have with Possum Creek Games. But if I mess up any details, that's totally on me. But yeah, so basically our haunt is about some ghosts that are haunting an old mansion together. It's live on Kickstarter right now. I think Kickstarter went to the 70 hours left, like kind of dramatic. We have a few days left to that Kickstarter. Yeah, and last but not least, of course, I'm also working with Sean and Evil Hat. So Sean, if you could talk about our project.
Absolutely. So Jamie, so I'm Sean Nittner. I use he, him pronouns. I am the director of products for Evil Hat, and I'm working with Jamie on Apocalypse Keys, which is a game that I personally fell in love with by way of Balak Bayan. So I remember we were talking about Balak Bayan. We were really excited about that, and then Jamie was like, "I kind of have this other game too," and I was like, "Hey, let's play it." And we played it, and I was like, "Oh my god, Jeremy, can we have this game, please, 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 please? Can we publish this game?" And that's by the way how I arrange publishing deals. Is I go, please, 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 please publish it. I really want to do it. It's gonna be great. And so Apocalypse Keys is a game about and Jeremy, I love the idea of presenting your game and you getting to tell me whether I did it right or not.
Of course, you can do it right.
It's a game about monsters who are trying to stave off the apocalypse, but in doing so may sort of become the monster themselves. So that is one like story arc. That is one like thread of the arc of the game that I think will feel like very very familiar to folks. Is like like when you look into the abyss. Be careful, the abyss doesn't look back. Sort of the cowboy metaphor of like if you leave society to protect it, you can't really rejoin it. You become the thing that you fight. But then there's another equally important thread of the story, which is like these extremely lonely creatures who are just like the loneliness that like Superman feels, where he's like, if I breathe too hard, I'll destroy the world around me. And I really want to love and be loved, and to feel like I have a home and a family, but like there's no easy way to do that. Like you have to like that's like a trial by fire because you have to be like, can you actually endure all of my power and also all of my like obligations and issues? Can you accept me as this like whole package? Can I be the kind of person who can love and be loved? And that is there's one playbook who really focuses on that, but in my feeling, like all the playbooks have that as part of their core. So it's this beautiful emotional story of like people trying to connect, as well as like monsters staving off the apocalypse. It's absolutely beautiful. It's every like Pacific Rim, like the apocalypse, is ended today, like yeah moment. Plus all of the like, I just want to tell you how I feel, but I don't know how. Yeah, it's beautiful. That's Apocalypse Keys.
Oh my
And
gosh, that was perfect. Yeah.
Oh, like, excellent. But glad I captured it right. And yes, if folks are in chat, Jason just posted, hit us the questions. We'd love to. I mean, we'll go over our individual sticks, but like we'd love to know what you're wearing as well. So yeah, Jason said
Yeah.
we have a bunch of different agreements and different ways we approach this. Jason, do you want to talk about how Genesis Legend and Jamie working on Once More to the Void?
Yeah. Thank you. A key thing to note is that Genesis of Legend Publishing is just starting up the process of co-publishing with other designers and publishing studios. We're relatively new in that domain. We've been around for a decade, but typically it's our own in-house projects. So this was an interesting challenge. The way that we arranged it was uh, Genesis of Legend Publishing is handling all of the core publishing tasks. These include establishing the Kickstarter campaign, monitoring the Kickstarter campaign, including dealing with comments and backer updates, etc., setting up the budgets, coordinating printing and all contracts and all budgets, and generally, we were on the forefront of the marketing side of things. So our job was to give Jamie as designer the space to work and to design his game to the best of his abilities. By contrast, Jamie was handling all of the playtesting, all of the game design, all of the writing, and was working with our consultants, Avery Alder, who has provided a ton of brilliant feedback, as well as working with our in-house editor to review and revise the text to get that in place. Now, I'm also providing some assistance. We're doing some joint review, talking through problems, etc. So I'm sticking my hand in a little bit on the design side, but just in a supportive function, more of a wall that Jamie can throw his ideas off, bounce his ideas off. So that's generally where we're set up. Now, the way that we handled the compensation is rather interesting, and I think that one of the reasons why I wanted us to have this panel was to show that there were a variety of different models that work well for North American publishers to work with and support, particularly designers from the global south and designers from areas who are underserved um, for things like Kickstarter as a platform, distribution, etc. So the approach that we took was we went in and we budgeted all of the labor that is going into the development of the game, including all of the labor that's gone into it so far. We broke it down into a number of days worth of work for each of the individual components. So we've got, I think we had something like 12 days worth of writing work that Jamie had already completed. And then we had a standard payout, a standard per day rate that was paid out to everyone who was working on the project based on the number of hours worth of labor they were putting into it. And we paid that out immediately upon receipt of the Kickstarter funding. All of the remaining money was kept aside for the printing, the shipping, and the potential profit. On paper, the approach was that Jamie would get 80% of the profit and Genesis of Legend would get 20%. And as part of this agreement, Genesis of Legend waived all but $1 for the publishing tasks, out of recognition of a number of factors. I mean, a good part of it was Genesis of Legend Publishing is using Once More Into the Void as fantastic marketing and something that fills our publication schedule. So that gives us a lot more space. It's been dramatically easier on my end because for this project, I didn't have to work. Oh, and Jamie's also doing the layout. So I didn't have to do the writing. I didn't have to do nearly as much of the design work. I don't have to do the layout. I don't have to do the art direction. So it's dramatically easier on my end, coming from the perspective of someone who's normally done everything. So it's been easier, and it worked out fairly well that way. Now, on other projects, taking the 20% of the net profit at the end of things would be reasonable, but I didn't think it was appropriate in this context. So hence why we reduced that down to $1 of token compensation for that. Now, the interesting bit that I think folks might want to model is I also have gotten the ability to purchase print copies at cost from Jammy from the print run for use for sale through distribution. So I am, given that Jammy doesn't have an extensive set of distribution partners, I'm buying copies from Jammy and then selling them into distribution. This means that I can purchase exactly the number of copies that I need, and I'm getting all of the economies of scale. So that is actually going to be where the profit is coming in for my business.
I was just going to ask Jason. So that means the split is off of the Kickstarter proceeds, but going forward, you're going to be buying books from Jammy, and then that's where Genesis Legend will get the profit. Is that you're going to mark, because you'll buy those at cost and then mark those up and sell them.
Exactly. So Jammy's getting all of the remaining copies, print copies, and is getting 100% of the PDF sales. But I'm getting the distribution sales functionally, with the exception of IPR, who we're going to be working with for warehousing and whatnot. That's where Jammy's remaining stock is going to be going. So people will be able to buy via IPR at support Jammy. But for the big distributors, I'm going to be working with my partners in Blackfire Entertainment, Aetherworks, ACD, Universal, and probably a couple others to get things to work out. Spiral Galaxy, yes. So I'll be pushing the products through those channels, in a way that doesn't detract from Jammy's profits. Because I am buying these copies at cost, it's functionally allowing Jammy to also get additional economies of scale, because it means that instead of printing 1,000 unit print run, we can push that up to 1,500, 2,000, or higher, by virtue of the fact that we're going to be able to push a lot of that product through distribution. So that is the model that we've generally taken, and we're still partway through the process. The other key thing to note is we are paying for all of the expenses before we have any profit. So right now we have a very healthy nest egg. That is a very healthy nest egg before printing in a world with limited paper and shipping, where container ships are lined up uh, 4 weeks deep and are occasionally lighting on fire.
Where are you printing out of, Jason? Are you printing out of
Uh,
China?
we're not printing out of China
Okay.
because, oh boy, no.
Yeah.
Also, we don't have high enough quantities to warrant printing out of China, even if that was a safe option these days. We had a very successful Kickstarter campaign that was around 40K US, which for my little company is very successful and is the biggest that we've pulled off. But it's not at the avatar we need to print in China because it's literally impossible otherwise. Um, we're probably talking right now. I'm thinking maybe around a 2,000 unit print run kind of thing. So
Are you domestic?
sorry.
Are you domestic then? Are you in the U.S.?
So yes, we're domestic, but the question is, what domestic are we talking about?
Oh, right, because you're in Canada.
Um,
Sorry.
I'm in Canada. So I'm doing all the analysis to determine if I'm printing in the US or printing in Canada, because that also is wildly variable for a number of reasons. We have different labor conditions here in terms of we've got less labor shortage. The Great Resignation hasn't happened to the same extent up north.
Yeah.
Um, our paper availability should theoretically be a little different. But then again, there's cross-border shipping. So how does that work out logistically? So there's a lot going into that. We may go with our partners and our friends over at Taylor Specialty or Bang once again because they are reliable and they're stateside, so that simplifies a lot of the shipping concerns. But we might instead go with some of our Canadian printers, depending on how the winds blow at that point in time. But it's an interesting challenge with two people from outside of the states while recognizing that almost all of the audience are in the states.
Yeah. I was just thinking about that. I was like, oh yeah, Jason is talking about publishing in the U.S. while not being in the U.S. But I mean, it's close enough, right? It's like you have a lot of you can run Kickstarter, you can work with U.S. companies, but it's not seamless as you.
No, which I discovered because if I want to export product from the U.S.,
Yeah.
the exporter of record has to be an American company.
Hmm. Good to know. Yeah.
So I was exporting one of my products, Sig City of Blades, available now. Seriously, it's awesome. It's Planescape meets Blades in the Dark. I mean,
Yeah, how can you go wrong? But I want to hear how
but
things
yeah.
are
So
going. Awesome.
I was shipping to Australia. I'm in Canada, so I couldn't export it to correctly to Australia. So yeah, challenges.
No.
So yeah, I've eaten up enough of our airtime. So any comments, questions, clarifications on this front? Jamie, is there anything I missed?
No. I think that was like an excellent breakdown of how things are going. So I'll talk about things from Possum Creek Games once again. I'm going to do my best. To and yeah, and also I want to maybe give a brief introduction. I realized because I was so nervous I didn't properly introduce myself. I forgot to say that I'm from the Philippines. So that's also part of it. So for those who don't know, there are many people from many countries that can't have access to crowdfunding things like Kickstarter, Indiegogo, all these other things. And so Kickstarter is something that I can't access by myself. And so if it wasn't for being able to work with Jason, Sean, and Jay, then it wouldn't be a thing. And another thing is that even if I had the means to like, we don't have a lot of print on demand things here in the Philippines. And even if we did, the number of people who are into RPGs who would buy these games are like super small already, right? And we all know like they're mostly playing or aware of D&D, so the ones who are aware of indie games are even smaller. Like it's very like, just to put things into perspective, a local convention here for TTRPGs, I think at one point we hit 150 people and we were like, oh wow, that's huge. These are big numbers, right? Compared to, so I cannot fathom the thousands that show up in American or Canadian conventions. But yeah. Yeah, so anyway, with that in mind, with Possum Creek Games, what happened is, so what is really interesting was Possum Creek Games, Wander Home did so well. Like it did such a fantastic job on Kickstarter beyond what Jay and Ruby were expecting initially, that they started to think, oh, maybe we can start working with other people. We can start publishing other indie designers. And so I was approached shortly after Wander Home funded. And it was actually Jamie who was like, Jamie looked at all of my games. And this is something that helped me as a designer is, well, I don't want to encourage people to write as many games as I did, but I do have a catalog of like 40 games, 40 plus games, so that people can like take a look and maybe.
It's a very impressive catalog. Yeah.
So
It's not a coincidence that you have gotten 3 separate publishing offers. You kind of gave us a wealth of games to choose from here.
yeah.
We
So,
each chose games that aligned with our personal brands, like our company brands.
Yeah.
right. Yeah, and I think that's also what helped is that I made a lot of games with a lot of different genres and topics with a lot of different systems. And so I think that's, and mostly that was because as a designer, I wanted to grow and really push myself and really experience as much as possible. But that really helped me like draw the eye of different publishers and people, I want to say. And yeah, so Jay looked at Arhant and felt like, and once again, it's like, it's what Jason said, it fits very well into what Possum Creek Games is doing in terms of like found family, in terms of like this nice mix of cozy, creepy, and things like that. So basically, it was Jamie who suggested Arhant. And from there, actually, Jamie was like, if we'll just publish it as is, and I was like, oh no, I want to make a second edition, and I want to, because I've learned so much in the past. So unlike my relationship with, well, I don't want to go into too much into the examination at this point, but basically Jamie was a little more hands off, and it was up to me like how much I wanted to redesign our haunt for the second edition. So the agreement that we have basically, and I'm pulling things up right now just to make sure, is so there was an advance against future royalties in the amount of $1,000, and then originally we weren't going to go to Kickstarter. Originally, it was meant to be like, because it's a smaller game. I think Jay was planning to just go straight to distributors and print through Possum Creek Games, through Mixem, but then it just so happened that there was a gap, and it seemed like our haunt would fit into Halloween really well. And then so Jay was like, let's have a smaller Kickstarter that's only like not the full month, and then let's just we have a smaller go of of $5,000. And so we funded in 30 minutes, which is really wild. Like, thank you so much to everyone who's supported our haunt. It's just really great. But yeah, so basically, Jamie asked me first because the agreement wasn't to go to Kickstarter initially, but then so once we went to Kickstarter, then basically the publisher agrees to provide the author with 50% of all profits from the Kickstarter campaign. And then moving forward, it's 15% of every physical and PDF copy from that point. So it's up to Possum Creek Games and the different distributors, but now there's like so it's a smaller cut of like 15%, but it's something that's going to build over time, basically, since it'll also affect all PDF copies that are going to be sold on the Possum Creek website as well. So I think that's mainly uh the biggest difference. Also, I can buy additional copies. Um oh, and I also have to mention that another interesting thing was the merchandising, because that was something that Possum Creek Games is experimenting with, like really pushing towards the merchandising, which you can see in our haunt. So we have like glow in the dark T-shirts. I suggested the glow in the dark part. Nothing else. That was my only contribution. I'm just very proud of the glow in the dark part. So, but yeah, and but I'm doing even less because it's Ruby handling the layout, Jay who's handling the art direction. Well, it was both Jay and Ruby handling the art direction. So I'm really only working on the game. The only thing I'm doing is writing. I'm doing absolutely nothing else for our haunt. But yeah. Yeah. So basically that's our haunt one. So Sean, do you want to jump in and talk about what we're doing instead and how much you're babysitting me? As we are kind of
This is an interesting question there. So one of the reasons why I structured mine in that format is because I didn't want to deal with the logistical nightmare of royalties. Because with our haunt, Jay is still going to have to deal with royalties 5 years from now.
Yep.
And give regular accounting of sales on whatever period that is. Is that quarterly or annual?
Quarterly.
Quarterly. So, which is perfectly reasonable as a thing to do, but that is additional work that I didn't want to do as a publisher, which is why I set it up as a fire and forget, where all of the long-term stuff just goes to you. You just get that. And I just get the upfront burst, and then everyone's happy, and there's less accounting. So that was an interesting compare and contrast. So, in terms of the profit, is that after expenses for printing and shipping, or is that for like, here's the Kickstarter, you get 50% of the Kickstarter?
Ooh, yeah, I think it's 50%. Let me double check. 50% of all profits from the Kickstarter campaign associated with the project.
That makes sense. You couldn't give 50% of the Kickstarter, but you don't have 50% of the Kickstarter. You know, you spend more than 50% on all the expenses of making the game.
Yeah, which is why I was curious. Like,
I mean, it would be nice. Yeah. Wow. So this is so cool because I was like, when we got on the beginning of this panel, like we had a few minutes, like tech check. I was like, "Hey, Jamie, how similar are the agreements?" And he was like, "They're totally different." And I was like, "I don't think they could be that different." And now I'm listening. I'm like, "Whoa, they're totally different." So interestingly, Evil Hat does not differentiate between Kickstarter and anything else. Like we are in a position where we like you said, Jason, like tracking royalties is a pain, but like we've been tracking royalties for at least more than 10 years now for lots of people. So for us, it's like it's another line item. It's like another person. It's like another royalty to track. But it is a pain. Like it is a ton of work. But so for us, there isn't a benefit to saying like let's settle the Kickstarter money, let's settle the Kickstarter thing, and then handle distribution and fulfillment separately. Like to us, it's just like it's one big pipeline. So backing up a little bit, the process that we kind of went through was originally, again, like I said, I fell in love with Ball Ion and made an offer to Jamie, and the offer was 35% of proceeds, so like 35% after cost, all profits, Kickstarter and otherwise, and with $1,000 advance. And that 35% is when we offer it, that is variable. It can go up or down by a few percent, and a lot of it has to do with like how much of the finishing stuff will do. So, and the reason, and really the reason for that is that like my time. So the things we bill against the project that we consider costs are the direct accountable things to the project. So like printing costs, editing costs, art costs, shipping costs, things that we can like say, oh, we are 100% certain that this cost entirely came from Apocalypse Keys. But what we don't put against it is anything like our warehousing costs or inventorying costs, because like we can't tell. We don't know like which pallets are cost. Like we could try to do the math, but it's way too fussy. The other thing that we don't put against it is like any of our internal staff costs. So my time, Fred's time, anybody, Tom's time for marketing, like all our marketing, all of our layout, all of our project management, all of our financial oversight stuff, like all that stuff is just like what we do, which is why that instead of it basically being a 50% cut, it's like, well, we should split it. but then we need to figure out a way to compensate for like the unknown costs that we have, like, or not the unknown, but the costs we can't like directly ascribe a line item to. There could be marketing costs that we add to it. Like, let's say we did like a backer kit campaign during Kickstarter, and it was like, well, for 15 grand, we can get another $100,000 of backing. Like, that's what we did with Thirsty Sword Lesbians. And so we talked to April and said, hey, like, do you want to invest in this? It's going to go as a cost on a line item, which means like we will collectively have to pay for it before we make profits, but it's going to be like a huge boon to the Kickstarter. And it was. I think those numbers are about right. Maybe it's 15 grand to 90 grand, but it was backer kit advertising during a Kickstarter was first time I ever done it was with TSL, and it blew me away. Anyway, that's totally different subject. So our approach is that Jamie brings the game, and you brought an amazing game, and it's fantastic. And then I would say like we take it from there, but we take it from there very much as partners, like very much together. So we brought on Avery as a system consultant and she gave a lot of feedback. Then we arranged a public playtest and set up a Discord server and all this playtesting, which was actually like really tough. Like it was tougher because a lot of folks for lots of different reasons didn't get the game. I feel like it was something where like the playtest feedback we got was really, really difficult to parse, and because it was like, hold on, what is it you're trying to do? Like, what game are you trying to play? And so it was a lot of both like mental labor of figuring it out and also emotional labor of being like, I can't read another 5-page bit of feedback on like why something. Anyway, so we handled the playtesting together. Then now we're working together to do revisions. And this is not true of all games. I don't always get this personally invested in games. A lot of games I'm the project manager. In this particular game, I'm also the developmental editor because I love it so much. And so I've been not that I don't love all of our I love all of our games. They're fantastic. But like this one just really, really clicked with me. And so Jamie and I, what he has called the babysitting, which is absolutely a lie. It's the privilege of getting to work with him on the development of this amazing freaking game. Are working on it along with another design consultant, and so we'll go through all of the revision process, and then at that point we'll have our editor. We'll hire an in-house editor to edit it, mark it up. Then Fred will do layout. Then we'll bring our art director in to divide the art. And the entire time, Jamie, you're not responsible for doing the work, but there's a constant consultation. It's like, what do you want? What's your ideas for the layout? What's your ideas for the art and all that stuff? And in fact, when we do art development, the creator is like, they're writing shotgun with the art director the whole time. Like you're CC'd on all the emails, so you'll see all the orders before they go out and all the sketches, etc. Then once we get the game to like text complete, layout complete, art has maybe started, that's when we'll go to Kickstarter and we'll run the Kickstarter campaign, the backer kit fulfillment. We'll also be doing the Roll20 integration. For us, that's basically become like a standard now. Like we just do Roll20, and that only became possible because Fred basically sat down and was like, I will spend 200 hours learning Roll20 character sheets. Like that's just, I'm a programmer by trade anyway, or he is a programmer by trade anyway. Like he already knew some basic programming, so he just was like, I will just do this work, and he learned it for Thirsty Sword Lesbians and for Monster of the Week, and so now another PBTA game. I won't say will be like trivial by any stretch, but like he has the framework in mind. So we'll build out the Roll20 character sheet, and then which is free. So that's a huge amount of labor, but it's a free product. But it enables the Roll20 module and the compendium, which will sell. So when we have the Kickstarter, we'll be able to like offer all of these things. And then going forward, we will just continue until it goes out of print, right? Until sales don't dictate another print run, we'll be managing all of the printing, shipping, fulfillment, and all that jazz. And my hope is that while we will constantly be asking you, Jamie, to like be marketing it, talking about it in your own circles and like promoting it, like your job at that point, it really depends on how popular it is. If the game isn't popular, which would be a shame, your job is like nothing. If the game is really popular, then your job is like to keep stoking that fire and like think about supplements, think about like that sort of thing. But like it's all like you don't like you kind of engage in that as much as you want. Yeah, so that's our model. To recap the numbers, because I know that's the thing a lot of people are interested in. We're Jamie has a 35% cut of all profits. So and that and we don't know like what size the Kickstarter will be. But but we're hoping that like that hoping numbers in the past, looking at Monster of the Week, looking at Thirsty Sword Lesbians, looking at Blades in the Dark, indicate like we should be sending hopefully Jamie a big check. That's the goal. Once the Kickstarter wraps and once and we'll be doing that quarterly. I think I covered that. Jamie, anything I'm missing on our end?
Yeah, I think like something to note is like with each one, like it's such a different scale. Like I'll say Arhot is the smallest game. Once More Into the Void is a little bigger than Arhot, and then Apocalypse Keys is like the chunky kaiju, the chunky boy, right? And so I think it really is a difference in scale. And so yeah, but basically yeah, I think you covered everything, Sean. Yeah, I'm already starting to think of like comparing and contrasting the differences.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So, a question for Apocalypse Keys. In terms of scale, I'm guessing that you're looking at six figures in terms of what you're expecting out of the Kickstarter?
Yeah, I mean low six, like
Six figures, but six figures.
yeah, like I'm thinking like if we look at our history of our last several Kickstarters, Thirsty Sword Lesbians blew us out of the water. We were hoping for like 150 and we hit nearly 300. That was fantastic. That way expanded beyond there. But like Fate of Cthulhu hit just under, it was like 90 something. And our previous Fate games were a little lower than that. So I think we're going to be at the like level of excitement with a PBTA game with Jamie, like Shay as a designer. I think like either just under, like in the 80 to 90 range, or just over. Like that's my hopes. And I kind of don't like saying that because then you put out a goal, be like the goal is 15,000 or 20,000. People are like, what do you mean? Because there's that like Kickstarter math of like, well, what's your goal, which is the absolute minimum you need to like proceed, and then what is it you're hoping for? Like, what do you think it could do? Yeah. So I would love to see this be at 100 grand, and if it exceeds that, like, woo, but like that's where I'm envisioning it.
Right. So one of the reasons why is My Little Press has been doing a terrible job at compensating our internal labor. So we budgeted for the labor of all of our internal resources up front as an expense, specifically because we are not good at paying our internal staff. Internal staff being Jason primarily. Whereas you've rolled that into your profit margin because you can't differentiate it between Apocalypse Keys warehousing versus Blades in the Dark warehousing, which makes sense. So I found that was an interesting difference, and I think it's largely because we were treating our internal staff like contractors because we aren't paying our internal staff salary.
And so pay ourselves a salary, and it's not a big one. Like I have a day job. Like I don't,
right.
To anyone who's looking at this being like, so how do I get rich publishing TTRPGs? I don't know the answer to that question. But yeah, we give ourselves a salary, and so it kind of like, I'm like, I know I'm getting covered. I know that like I'm not worried about, from all the sales in all of our different channels. I don't have to worry that like, well, if this one game does particularly well or poorly, will I be able to pay myself by the month? But like that is something that we can say, just simply because like we've been doing this for a really long time. Like I think, Jason, I think we've got 5 or so years on you, and I really think in those 5 years, like you will also see as you continue to run publishing, like more ability to just hopefully give yourself a salary. Hopefully, just be able to the point where you're just like, I'm doing all this work all the time. I don't know whether it's for this game or that game, but like Genesis Legend is just going to pay me because I know I'm doing all this work, and it still won't be worth your time as a publisher. That's the one thing you always do is you always undercut yourself. You're always like, well, someone's not going to get paid here. It's going to be me because that is the only ethical choice. But we've had lots of gaffes where like we had a horrible mess up with the print run on TSL, and we just ate it. Like our printer covered some of the costs, but we just covered the rest. We didn't push any of that to April because that would not. It's not her fault. Not anything she has any control over. It's not anybody's fault. But like I totally get as a publisher, you have to like cost. But I hope someday you're just like I'm giving
Yeah.
myself a bit.
Yeah, I am absolutely 5 to 7 years behind Evil Hat. Um,
Yes.
so we just recently got our second in-house resource.
Nice.
So we have our in-house editor now, Christopher Rothwell, who's fantastic. He's a new editor, but he's very nice and very skilled. So
we got some questions in chat.
Yeah, we absolutely have some questions. There is a growing up stage. My little company is at the point where we now have enough cash flow that we can do development on future projects sustainably. We have enough flow to be able to work on things later on in the pipeline without having to rob from Peter to pay Paul. All right. So questions.
Yeah.
Sending a big check over. How have you found dealing with handling payments and taxes internationally? Oh, good God.
Yeah. I will say I had to tell Jason, could you please send the money in installments because PayPal will punish me for being a Filipino, right? Like if I get too much money in one go, PayPal will be like, "Oh, you're from the Philippines. This is really suspicious," right? So I can't get like huge chunks in one go, but then that means that the fees and stuff eat more into it. But it's the only way I can make sure because one time when I got paid for what I did with Wander Home, and it wasn't. I mean, it was a pretty big amount, but it wasn't that big. PayPal just was like, "No, you're now suspicious. We're going to shut down your account for 3 weeks, and you're going to have to send us all this paperwork." So it took me like a whole 2 months, and the whole time they were like saying, "But we're not sure if we're going to open it up again." So I was really at the point of like where I could have lost everything that was in the account, right? So yeah. So that is like a thing, but so far all I have access to that's easy to work with is PayPal, because anything else with the banking stuff is just like still kind of a nightmare. Like it's so stressful that I wanted to start talking Tagalog, like switch to a different language. But yeah. So it's definitely a thing. But PayPal is the best bet, but I have to do it in installments.
We also use Wise, which used to be called TransferWise, and Wise actually has a smaller cut than PayPal in terms of the currency. They do about a similar currency exchange, but they take a smaller cut. But it's such a pain to set up. Like TransferWise is one of those things where if you don't have everything, just like the bank address, the bank account number, the routing number, like every single detail, they say, oh, you can just like send to somebody by their email. But that's only true if they're completely set up on their end. And we have had so many times where we've sent money over TransferWise and it gets stuck in limbo for a long time, and then they bounce it back to us. And so we will use it for international payments because Evil Hat makes international payments, like not just in royalty checks. We make them to artists, and like we make them all the time. And PayPal is by far the preferred method. And we just eat fees. Like whenever there's like a transfer fee, it's never enough. Like it's anywhere from $5 to $30, and like yeah, that adds up, but like it doesn't add up to be enough that we're going to like. We just consider those like cost of doing business fees, right? Those are transactional fees, and they're just frankly worth it because it works. Like with the exception of sometimes you can't send money. Although we sent huge payments via PayPal to Michael Sands in New Zealand, and because it's New Zealand. you know, versus the Philippines or versus other countries, like that hasn't been an issue. Those have gone through, and I'm hoping, Jamie, that like now that you've proved you're you, maybe in the future, but like I don't know, do you want to risk it? Do you want to risk the like
Yeah,
the
because like it was so heartbreaking when the Wander Home problem happened because I had been getting regular payments through Itch.io and Patreon and commissions up to that point, and I was like, and now you have a problem, right? Like it feels kind of like random, but I haven't had problems since then, so hopefully like it'll just continue to improve.
Kira said, I've received national payments via direct bank deposit, most recently in Italy. Yeah, the closest I've found to being able to send money, like inject money into someone else's bank account, is using TransferWise, where it goes bank account to bank account. But it's again, it's like one of these like roll the dice. Like the money never goes away, but it definitely has gotten held up for weeks, where we're just like, I want to pay you. Like I've sent the money, I don't have it, you don't have it. What the hell is it doing? And most of the time it does eventually go through, but there's definitely times where we just been like throw our hands up in the air and set up with PayPal and said, well, leave the fees.
Yep. So for us, yes, we eat the fees, but the we is the entire project.
Right.
We take this on the before profits portion because none of us are seeing that fee money. It's just a price of the work. So on a related note, there was a discussion on currency conversions. So
Yeah.
can we talk about the upside of the international agreements for Jamie in that currency conversions? So, how much does one sweet American dollar actually get you realistically?
Yeah, let me check it out right now. American to pesos, because like it goes back and forth because we have a very stable president. Totally not a problem. Ooh, today's pretty good. Today it's at 50 pesos to the American dollar. And so yeah, and I mean, to be completely frank, this is the main reason why I can do game design full time. Because I live in the Philippines, right? And so it's far easier. Like the American dollar, just like I can stretch it much further, right? Compared to if I was living somewhere else. But yeah.
Yeah, that's the hope, is that like even with the like these little fees and things like that, like the currency exchange at the end is yeah, it just makes it go further. I mean, and it's also
Yeah.
what you brought up earlier, Jamie. It's just like even the access to things like Kickstarter, right? Like which you just can't run. So I think it makes a lot of sense in that regard. That like uh, it's we if it was ever possible, like we want to make people a living wage, right? Like I don't think that's the route, but like we're trying, we're going for it, and it's nice.
Yeah,
nice to do, right?
and that's the thing I love. I think that's one of the reasons why these international publishing agreements can be powerful because um, the RPG industry is notoriously bad at paying our people, but this is just the bare minimum in North America. In other places can actually be a reasonable living wage. Like I forgot what time there was one point during the Kickstarter campaign where I was saying, yeah, so it looks like you'll be getting like 1,000,000 peso.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, I want to say my mom has been very worried for me since I became a game designer, and I was like, "But mom, the Kickstarter did pretty well," and then she refused to believe me, right? And I was like, "Yeah, yeah." But actually, this is the first time I've been this financially secure in a long time, right? Like it's yeah, yeah. So, ironically, we're in the middle of a panini, but but oh yeah, thanks, Jim. But yeah, but definitely yeah, things are far more stable than they used to be. So
So it's so rewarding to be able to pay people well.
Yeah.
So yeah. Let's see, more questions that we've got. Best ways to maintain questions across countries and time zones and looking beyond known designers.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are two. Can you hear me? I just switched to headphones.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I think those are two really, I don't know, very different questions and very big ones. But we got 9 minutes, so let's dive into them. I mean, time zones is one of those things where I feel like the advantage is, and Jason, you tell me if this is wrong for you. Like the advantage is that most of all of our publishers are people who are like, we're publishers with with day jobs, but also like B with like, we're not working 9 to 5 gigs when we're publishing. Like Evil Hat is entirely remote. We're entirely like, I work on stuff at 3 in the morning or 10 at night or 7 in the morning. We can be flexible. So I have lots of meetings with Jamie in my evening, his morning, and sometimes we do vice versa. Sometimes every once in a while I'll get up really early and it'll be really late for you, Jamie. But I've definitely, I think across all time zones, there's always some time slot. What I found is the trickiest is when you have like multiple time zones. So sometimes I've tried to arrange a meeting with me, uh, someone in the Philippines, and Fred, who's on the East Coast, and I'm on the West Coast, and it's like the only time really that works is like 7:30 in the morning for me, and then like that is works across all the brackets. But a lot of it is just like the fact that we're small enough to kind of be nimble and just sort of work with time zones. And our co-publishers are also willing to get up early in the morning or to get on meetings. We've definitely had times where we're like, okay, we're here, we're ready
Yeah,
for the meeting.
my schedule looks like super busy in the morning, super busy in the evening, and I just take a nap for my brain stuff during the day. So yeah, but
For scale, I believe that this panel is going on at 1 in the morning for poor Jamie.
right, it's
Um,
1:22 a.m. right now.
yep,
Yeah.
yep.
Yeah.
Now the the hidden grace that I've gotten is I am for half the year I'm exactly 12 hours offset from Jamie. It's awesome. I'm like, we're gonna meet at 8. Fantastic. We are meeting at 8.
Yep. Yeah,
Um,
that is very nice. I don't have that luxury, but yeah.
right. By contrast, I work with folks in Europe or in Australia. And it's like, all right, so
Oh,
let's try
that's
to figure
tougher.
this
Yeah,
out.
Yeah,
way
I live by
tougher.
Um,
Google Calendar. Like, I'm
Yeah,
just
I
like,
was
hold
gonna
on.
say,
We
yeah.
agree on a time, but we'll really know if we agree on that time when I send the calendar invite because then it's localized and we all know what we're talking about. And then we can go, oh, wait. Sorry, I forgot. We're more different, we're more farther off. I think the next part of this question, though, is looking beyond known designers. Like, that is an extremely important element. And that is something that I think for us, a lot of it is word of mouth. So, like, we work in circles. So I will know, I do a lot of like cross pollination and overlap. So for me, Big Bad Con is an event that I personally like invest in, and it really is value. I think it has a ton of value, but it's also a place where like I get to meet tons of designers and gamers. So it's this thing where like as being someone in this industry, we always wear a bunch of different hats, and you try to employ as many of those as you can to meet people in as many different spaces. And so sometimes that's, well, I go to conventions, or I post a convention, or I, do these other sort of networking things to kind of keep reaching out to people and reaching out to people at all levels. It's not like, hey, I'm this new hotshot game designer. It's like, hey, I've got an idea for a game. Oh, let's talk about it. Maybe a year later, like, hey, I have a pitch for it. That's literally happened many times. Right? I've talked to people who are like very nascent, and we kind of get like the ball rolling, and then later on, I see it when it's come further along. But then there's also like working within circles of like, once somebody's getting published or whatnot, like they can be like, hey, I know this person, my friend did this, right? So there's like these growing circles of connections that we hope to just keep building a bigger and bigger bridge to make that more accessible. But it's inevitably, it's some level, it's about making that connection. So you don't have to be famous, you don't have to be well published, you don't have to be known, but you've got to have like some kind of connection, which could be social media, could be attending a con, could be working with someone, like partnering with someone else who is more connected. But ultimately, like, we have to know someone's name before we can before we connect with them. So there's a lot of work, I think, that all of us, sorry, I'm talking too much, all of us put into trying to do that, to try and really broaden our circles.
wanted to specifically give a shout out to Big Bad Con that Sean is leading, because that did a fantastic job of bringing folks, particularly from Southeast Asia, giving more awareness on that front. And Metatopia is another fantastic opportunity for these kinds of connections to emerge organically.
Thank you, Tobias.
But it's a potential perpetual problem. So we've got a couple minutes left, so let's just let folks know where they can find us and what we're working on now. Sean, let's start with you.
Sure thing. I'm Sean Nittner. You can find me pretty much everywhere at Sean Nittner. Well, you can find me on Twitter at Sean Nittner. I have finally freed myself of chains of Facebook. It's gone. You can see all our games at evilhat.com. If you click on the project status page, you'll see most of our announced games, but we have several other games that are in the works. At any given time, I'm juggling about a dozen projects. So even if we're not like talking about a game, that's because we aren't at a place where we're ready to say there's some action you can take. Like you can Kickstarter it, you can play test it, you can get involved in some way. But yeah, check out evilhat.com. Also, if you want to know more about Big Bad, last week was Big Bad Online, and we have all the panels for that up on YouTube. We also have audio versions of them on Anchor, and there's links on the site to that, so you can check out all those wonderful panels that included these two beautiful individuals who were both on various panels. That's me. How about you, Jamie?
Yeah, so hi, I'm Jamie. My pronouns are he, they. Thank you so much for everybody who joined us. I'm working on a lot of things, like everybody here, right? So my biggest projects right now are Apocalypse Keys, Once More Into the Void, Our Hunt, Void Walkers, which is a role exclusive, a couple of Brinkwood games. I know I'm working actively on like 7 total ones, and I don't want to think about the back burner ones right now. But yeah, and so you can keep track of my stuff on Twitter at Temporal Hiccup. You can support me on patreon.com/StoryQueenGames. My patrons do help out a lot to keep things stable as well. Yeah, so that's basically where you can find me. I too have freed myself from Facebook, so it's just Twitter and Sailor Moon GIFs for me. How about you, Jason?
Right. So Jason Pitt, he, him, at Genesis of Legend on Twitter, genesisoflegend.com or .ca if you want the CanCon. We are working on Once More Into the Void currently. We just released SIG City of Blades for planar fantasy heist action. And we're working on a few other products such as Songfall Survivors, our first expansion for After the War, and Fate of the Galaxy, which is currently under a heavy redesign because playtesting, it's powerful and fickle. All right, so with that, we shall let you all be. Thank you very much for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, everybody.
Been great. Thanks all.
Thanks so much.
Ciao.